take a look at photo video news. First one, DPReview, always a great site for information. There is a mention of Tamron's 35 to 150mm f2 to 2.8 coming out pretty soon. In this case, it mentions Z-mount. I would assume also E-mount. Let's take a look. It's an interesting focal length combination. 35 is decently wide, but it's not going to be ultra wide angle, obviously. Okay, so actually a few years ago, it's already been on the E-mount for a while, so it's nice to see that that is coming to Z-mount. Gives more options for those photographers, which is actually me with the Z5. Not that I have $2,000, but I could potentially go this route. It looks interesting. 150mm at f2.8 seems pretty good. It's not going to give you a 7200 2.8 style lens, because you're going to be missing about 50mm, but 35mm f2 on the wide end is an interesting combination. Yeah, cool lens. Obviously it's going to be bigger than just having a prime lens and something else, but pretty interesting combination. Let's see, 9 aperture blades. Yeah, there's also a Tamron 17 to 50 f4 for Sony E-mount. So this must be a very new lens. Sony E-mount seems to be the one to get all the good third-party stuff first. So if you're into different options, I think Sony is the way to go at this current moment. That could potentially be a nice little walk-around lens. 17, I assume this is a full frame. 17 is a pretty good starter wide angle for full frame. F4 maximum constant through the range is always nice. Obviously it's not f2.8, but you're making a compromise of size, weight, potentially, and price. Pretty good. I don't see a MSRP here. With how expensive photography has been getting, it's probably not going to be cheap as it is, but obviously cheaper than a f2.8 maximum lens. So they have another article here. It says, why Nikon APS-C Z-mount is worth another look in 2023. I tend to agree. There are a decent number of options now, but I feel like there are a few limitations with Z-mount. Obviously no sensor-based stabilization on APS-C for the moment. It seems odd they haven't added that. The original Z APS-C cameras getting up there in age. Still is a decent camera, but you could find newer stuff at this point. And they also have the Z30, which is a video focus model, but again, it has some limitations. It's honestly not very much different than my M6 Mark II bodies that I have. Tend to use it for video, but I actually output the HDMI in those cases a lot of the time to a Ninja 5, which I'll be talking about in a little bit. But they did get these Sigma lenses, the trio of APS-C primes. Obviously with the Z mount, it's a very wide mount and it looks a little bit goofy. I mean, that's not going to affect the photos or anything. I have this for EFM and the 16 as well. They're nice lenses. I like them. They do have that ZFC thing. Don't have a personal interest in the retro styled cameras that much, but that's a nice option for people that are into that. I think I mentioned this in another stream. I did talk about on my website, the Z30 were to get an upgrade of some type. This is kind of the route that I would go with stuff like that. Larger battery, basically similar to the Sony FX30, but for Nikon and cheaper is kind of what I would want. Like I said, my M6 Mark II cameras are so similar to the Z30, there isn't a big reason for me to sell all of my EFM equipment. Hopefully we'll see some improvements there eventually. Talking about the Atmos Ninja 5, I have the original with the upgraded encoder, so I have H.265. It's a very efficient encoder. I use it at 8-bit actually, and I get decent files out of it, very small size. It works well. With the M6 Mark IIs, I tend to use those cameras with the Ninja 5. Good combination, don't have any issues, except for some weird audio quirks, but besides that, they work well together. In this case, looks like they are releasing 2 new models. The main issue I do have with the Ninja 5 is the fan and the sound from it. It's not bad enough to be bad for the recordings, basically, but it does make noise, and it would be nicer if it were silent or very quiet. So I don't know if these new ones are quieter, at least at 4K and such, but they apparently are going up to 8K 30 and 6K 30 for recording, so that's hitting the highest of high-end cameras now with that. So potentially an interesting option if you want a high quality recorder, you want a large preview screen. I think they're a nice option. If you change out your camera pretty frequently, it might make sense to get the recorder and have the consistency of that, and then the camera doesn't matter as much because you just output the HDMI signal and you're good. And then everything is very consistent on the file side. And of course you can attach a SSD, so that's convenient and fast for file transfers. They also have a bunch of online options and everything else now. I like the original Ninja 5, but again, the sound profile of it isn't great. Notice this article on Digital Camera World. They mention, of course this is just an opinion article, but it looked interesting. Their crazy idea for micro four thirds camera system. I think there were some issues recently. I don't know if it was a rumor, but Sigma might not be developing new lenses for micro four thirds. That's a potential very large consideration with that format, because why is Sigma potentially not doing that? Is the market shrinking for this camera system? Who knows? But this person mentions the challenges of sensor format with APS-C versus full frame versus micro four thirds. Obviously this is the smallest one of the group, and it's tough to pick which one you want. And I wouldn't say that micro four thirds is as small as it could be. It's a lot of these cameras are very robust. They seem to go that route where they're good in the outdoor situations and stuff. So you have the OM system EM1 series, very good for nature photography and such. I think that's a good use case, but I don't know how large that market is. I would personally have liked to see more smaller, ultra compact micro four thirds stuff, but for whatever reason, there haven't been a ton of those options. With this, I think prices are just not there either. It just seems too expensive for what you're getting from a sensor size standpoint, obviously not from a robust weather sealed standpoint, because there aren't a huge amount of options for that, and also it's going to add to the cost. Personally, I think it would make more sense just to go cheaper and go smaller for that format, but I don't think it's going to happen. This person mentioned doing a square sensor format. It could potentially help if you want to do a mix of vertical and horizontal, but I don't think that fits with the nature rugged photographers. Do they really care if it's a square sensor? I'm not sure. If you want to go content creation route, again, cheaper, smaller, versatile cameras that can do a lot of video, vertical video, horizontal video, I think that would make sense to have a square sensor. I don't know if it would change anything ultimately, unless they got really, really popular. They had a very consistent like vlog type of camera. Every quote unquote vlog camera I've seen from the micro four thirds stuff is just not good. Actually, yeah, I think it was Panasonic had a camera they called a vlog camera for micro four thirds, and it didn't have sensor based stabilization. So I don't have a lot of hope for that system. We'll see though. I saw this news article from Sony's actual website mentioning a really unique type of viewfinder setup. So they call it the Retina Projection Camera Kit with a HX99 camera in it, which I don't even know this model of camera. It's probably a really tiny sensor, but basically this is meant to help people with difficulty, like physical difficulty, viewing standard screens and also EVFs of regular cameras. So it seems kind of interesting. I'd be curious to try this thing and just see what it looks like with the laser projection. So they call it Restiza Neo Viewer. Pretty intense sounding, but literal retina projection technology. Sounds kind of cool. There's not a huge amount of information on it, but I would again be curious to check it out. There's the viewport or whatever you want to call it, and they basically just attach a camera to it. Makes it quite a bit larger. I don't know why they specifically selected this camera. I would assume it's just using HDMI out, unless they needed extra information or something from the camera to make this thing work. Pretty cool though. It's nice to come up with stuff like that to help people out. Let's see, what was the price? $600 doesn't sound terrible for whatever this thing actually is. Obviously it's going to be a markup on the camera itself, but probably not a lot. So last thing we're going to look at is the Rode Wireless Pro 2. Comes with a kit basically of 2 transmitters and then the receiver, but the transmitters can record internally. That seems to be the thing these days, and I think it's great to see where the actual thing that sends the audio is able to record that backup. I think that's vital with any type of wireless system, so it's nice to have. I don't know exactly how this changes from their previous setups, but I do think, yeah, you get this little case, which is nice, and I'm pretty sure you can charge them in the case from the pictures that I had seen. Yeah, so it's got little slots, USB-C port. I don't know if this case has a battery inside itself, but at the very least you should be able to charge it all at once, which is good. Comes with the 2 microphones. Pretty cool. I wouldn't mind trying some type of system like this in the future. I haven't personally picked up any of these wireless microphone systems, but if I were to pick one up, it would definitely need to have the internal backup recording on the transmitter. I just wouldn't trust wireless microphone stuff without that. So it is very nice to see that most of them are transitioning to that technology. The transmitters feature 32-bit float recording to maximize dynamic range, prevent digital clipping, ensure noise-free normalization, even on very quiet recordings. So 32-bit float is, again, another relatively recent feature in audio recording technology. So it's probably a mix of that ability plus getting different levels of analog to digital. So I assume it has a wide enough range of actual recording that saving it at 32-bit float makes sense. So that looks like a cool system. There are a bunch of other options. DJI has their own stuff. I think Hollyland, they had contacted me, but they never sent anything. They have a similar system. I don't think it does 32-bit float, but it does the internal backup recording on the transmitters, which I think is the main key thing to have. Not the cheapest thing ever, although it's a full kit with a case. It's good for photo video news at the moment. Scott of Photography Bonsai. See you.